Zane Dawson wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand, gripping the hammer tighter as he looked up at the half-built treehouse. "What do you think, Rosie?" He called down to the little girl spinning in circles below the oak tree, her curly hair bouncing as she giggled. "I think it's going to be magical, Daddy," he grinned. "Then we're on the right track." He didn't have much, just a two-bedroom rental on the edge of town, a beat-up pickup, and a toolbox that was missing more than a few pieces. But he had Rosie. And she had asked him for a treehouse for her 7th birthday, so he was going to build the best treehouse this world had ever seen. What he didn't know was that someone was watching. Across the white picket fence that separated their yard from the sprawling modern house next door, Harper Grant stood barefoot on her balcony, coffee mug in hand, her sharp eyes following the man in the faded gray t-shirt and jeans. Her morning meetings could wait. Because it wasn't every day she saw a man like that, rugged, focused, patient with a child who clearly adored him. She had moved into the house 2 weeks ago, wanting quiet. Time to think, time to breathe. After 10 years of non-stop boardrooms, red carpets, and headlines, she'd finally taken a step back from the empire she'd built. Grant Innovations, a billion-dollar tech company now run by the team she'd handpicked. Temporary sabbatical, her assistant had called it. But as Harper watched Zane lift a wooden beam onto his shoulder and climb the ladder again, she realized something she hadn't expected. She wasn't bored. She was curious. The next day, the banging started early again. Harper was trying to read well, trying to pretend to read, but the sound of wood being hammered together kept pulling her attention. She finally gave up, grabbed an apple from the kitchen, and walked outside. "Hey," she called over the fence. Zane looked up, startled. He squinted into the sunlight. "Oh, hi." Harper stepped closer. "I'm Harper. I live next door, Zane," he said, brushing sawdust off his hands. "Sorry about the noise." "No, I don't mind. It's impressive." She nodded toward the treehouse. "You're building that for your daughter?" "Yeah." "For Rosie." As if summoned, Rosie popped her head out of the open window of the treehouse. "Hi, lady," Harper laughed. "Hi, Rosie." Zane scratched the back of his neck. "She's been asking for one since Christmas. Figured I'd finally make it happen." Harper leaned on the fence. "You're doing a great job." He smiled a little shyly, and Harper felt her chest tighten. There was something about the way he looked at her, honest, open, like he wasn't trying to impress her, like he didn't know who she was, and that was rare. "Thanks," he said. "I'm kinda winging it." "You want help?" He blinked. "Help? I grew up building things with my dad. I'm not bad with a drill." Zane hesitated, then glanced at Rosie, who was now hanging upside down from the window frame. "You sure?" She shrugged. "I offered." He grinned. "Then come on over." By the 3rd day, Harper had dirt under her nails and scratches on her palms. She didn't care. She was laughing more than she had in years. Zane was funny in a dry, quiet way. He told stories about his childhood in Montana, about how he used to build forts out of hay bales and get scolded by his grandma for tracking mud into the kitchen. And Rosie, sweet, bold Rosie, had claimed Harper as her official treehouse co-captain. "You work with computers or something?" Zane asked one afternoon as they painted a railing. Harper froze for a second. "Yeah, something like that." "Huh," he said. "That explains the fancy car." She looked at him, surprised. "You noticed?" "Hard to miss a black Jag parked next to my rust bucket truck." She laughed. "Fair." But he didn't push, he didn't ask for details, and Harper didn't offer any. For the first time, she didn't have to be Harper Grant, CEO, Forbes' richest under 40. She could just be Harper, and it felt good. That night, Zane stood in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Rosie was humming to herself at the table, coloring a picture of the treehouse. He glanced at the drawing, then at her. "You like Harper, huh?" Rosie nodded. "She's pretty, and she laughs at your jokes." Zane chuckled. "She does, doesn't she? Are you gonna marry her?" He nearly dropped the spatula. "What, Rosie?" she giggled. "You smiled at her like Uncle Tom smiles at Aunt May." Zane shook his head, cheeks burning. "Eat your sandwich, kiddo." But later, after she was asleep, Zane stood by the window, looking out at the house next door. He could see the balcony light still on. And he wondered, what would a woman like Harper want with a man like him? The next morning, Harper showed up with 3 lattes and a box of pastries. "Peace offering," she said. "For what?" "For accidentally painting over your level line yesterday." Zane laughed. I wasn't gonna say anything, but yeah, that wall's crooked now. They spent the next few hours fixing it, talking about everything and nothing. When Harper reached for a nail but missed, Zane caught her wrist without thinking. "You okay?" he asked, his voice lower than before. Their eyes met. Something shifted. "Yeah," Harper said softly. "I'm okay." That night, Zane found Rosie asleep in the treehouse, curled up in a blanket, her flashlight still on. He carried her down carefully, tucking her into bed inside the house. Then he stepped onto the porch and saw Harper sitting on her balcony again, wine glass in hand. He raised a hand in a brief wave. She waved back. Neither of them said anything. But both of them were thinking the same thing. Something was happening, and it was only just beginning. Zane leaned over the picnic table in the backyard, sketching the final touches for the treehouse railing while Rosie played with a set of wooden blocks beside him. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the grass, and a breeze rustled the leaves overhead. He checked his watch. Almost 5. She hadn't come by today. He hadn't expected her to. Harper didn't owe him anything. But still, he'd caught himself glancing at her balcony more than once, wondering if she'd step outside with her coffee or that quiet, unreadable look she wore when she watched the world as if it were a chessboard. "Daddy, can we paint the inside purple?" Rosie asked, holding up a crayon like it was a paint swatch. "Purple, huh? That's a bold color," she beamed. "It's magical," he smiled. "Then purple it is." He was tightening a bolt when he heard footsteps on gravel. Harper rounded the corner in jeans and a pale blue blouse, her hair twisted into a loose braid that looked too effortless to be accidental. "I was starting to think you got bored of us," Zane said, standing to stretch his back. She held up a paper bag. "Bribery. Fresh pretzels from the market downtown. You ever had the cinnamon ones?" Rosie perked up. "I want one." "I see how it is," Zane said. "She gets one before me." Harper handed him a pretzel. "You get the biggest one." For craftsmanship. Rosie climbed into Harper's lap without asking, chattering about the curtains she wanted in the treehouse. Zane watched them from across the table, something tightening in his chest. Rosie didn't warm up to people that fast, but she decided Harper belonged, and that was that. "So," Harper said when Rosie ran off to find her glitter markers, "I heard you and your brother used to sneak into the county fairgrounds after hours." Zane laughed. "Let me guess." "Rosie told you. She said you got caught by the sheriff and made him a peach cobbler so he wouldn't tell your mom." "That's almost accurate. Tom baked the cobbler. I did the dishes." Harper leaned back, studying him. "You're a good dad." He looked down at the wood shavings clinging to his jeans. "I just try not to mess her up too badly. Don't sell yourself short." A quiet pause settled between them. Then Harper asked, "What happened to her mom?" Zane's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "She left when Rosie was 3, said she needed more than this life." I didn't argue. "Just packed her suitcase." Harper's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. "That must have been hard, raising her alone." "It's not a burden," he said. "It's just life. You do what needs doing." She nodded, then looked toward the treehouse. "It's more than most people would do." Zane cleared his throat. "What about you? You got anyone back in the city?" "No," Harper said. "Too many suits. Everyone either wanted to pitch a startup or get access to my boardroom." He chuckled. "Sounds romantic. That's why I left. I needed to remember what it's like to be around people who don't want anything from me." There it was. Her voice had shifted just slightly, like she was testing the waters. "You think I want something from you?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. He held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "All I want is to finish that railing before Rosie decides to decorate it with stickers." Harper laughed, almost surprised at herself. "You're impossible, but efficient," he added, grabbing the drill. Later, after Rosie had gone inside to work on her storybook, and Harper helped Zane sweep up the sawdust, she lingered at the base of the tree. The light had dipped low enough that their shadows stretched long across the grass. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I get that a lot." "No, I mean it," she said. "I've met a lot of people with charm and good intentions, but you're different. That a good thing or a bad thing? I haven't decided yet." Zane leaned against the tree, arms crossed. "You always this careful?" "I have to be," Harper admitted. "Trust is expensive in my world," he nodded, then pushed off the tree. "Well, in mine it's free, but it takes time." As they walked toward the house, Harper glanced at the porch light flickering on. I should get back. I have a call with Tokyo at 7. Tokyo, casual, she smiled faintly. Just a few people I used to work with. Zane didn't ask for more. He just opened the gate for her and waited. Halfway through the yard, she turned back. You ever build anything other than tree houses? I built a chicken coop once, he said. It collapsed in a week. She laughed. Let's hope the treehouse lasts longer. I reinforced it with metal brackets. It'll survive a hurricane. At her front door, she paused, hand on the knob. Zane? Yeah, thanks. For today. He dipped his head but didn't speak. She disappeared inside. That night, Zane sat by the window with a cold beer, watching the stars blink into view. He didn't know what he was doing, letting himself look forward to her visits, listening for footsteps that might not come. He never let his guard down, not since Rosie's mother left. But Harper wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, and maybe that was exactly what worried him. Zane stood in the hallway, towel draped over his shoulder, still damp from the shower. Through the cracked door, he could hear Rosie whispering to her stuffed animals, orchestrating an elaborate bedtime adventure that involved pirates, glitter, and a talking narwhal named Sir Pickles. He smiled, but it faded quickly as he turned toward the kitchen. The rent bill sat on the counter, unopened. He'd glanced at the envelope that morning, recognized the handwriting from the landlord, and set it aside. He didn't need to look to know what it said. He was 2 weeks behind. The last plumbing job had fallen through, and the next one wasn't until Friday. He opened the fridge, stared at the half-empty shelves, then closed it again. Outside, the porch light flickered once before burning steady. He reached for the bulb, jiggled it in the socket, and made a mental note to replace it right after he figured out how to stretch $37 until the weekend. A knock. He turned, startled. No one ever came by at this hour. He opened the door to find Harper standing on the step, holding a large metal tin. Sorry it's late, she said. I baked too much banana bread and Rosie said you liked it. He stepped back to let her in. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said, walking past him and setting the tin on the counter. But I wanted to. He closed the door behind her, watching as she looked around the kitchen, the chipped tile countertops, the aging cabinets, the magnet letters Rosie had arranged into nonsense words on the fridge. She didn't say anything about any of it. You okay? She asked. He hesitated, then gave a short nod. Just tired. Harper looked at him for a long second, then crossed the kitchen and leaned against the counter. Do you ever let anyone help you? He frowned. Help with what? Anything. I manage fine. I didn't say you didn't, she said gently. But managing isn't the same as living. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the tin and broke apart a piece of bread, handing her half. She took it without comment, then glanced toward the hallway. She asleep, probably still fighting sea monsters. She has your imagination. He gave a quiet laugh. She has her own world, I just try to keep it safe. Harper studied him. You know, I used to think success meant control. If I could just keep everything perfectly aligned, nothing could fall apart. And did that work? For a while, she said. Then it didn't. My father had a heart attack during a quarterly earnings call. I was presenting. He was watching from home. I didn't even know it happened until after the market closed. Zane looked at her, surprised. I'm sorry. I spent years trying to build something he'd be proud of, but I wasn't there when it mattered. He didn't know what to say to that. She turned toward the window. That's why I'm here. I thought maybe if I stepped away, I could figure out what really matters. Zane crossed his arms. And? I haven't figured it out yet. He nodded slowly. Maybe no one does. Maybe we just try not to screw things up too badly along the way. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You ever think about leaving this place? He raised an eyebrow. You mean the house? I mean all of it, starting over somewhere else. He considered the question. Rosie's got her school, her friends. It's not just me anymore. What about you? I've got my tools, my truck. That's enough. But is it what you want? Zane looked away. Doesn't matter. Yes, it does. He shook his head. Look, I don't know what this is us talking like this, but I don't have the kind of life where I get to think about what I want. I think about what works, what keeps food on the table. What keeps her smiling. Harper stepped closer. You think I'm here because I feel sorry for you. I think you're here because you needed a break from your real life and I'm just convenient. That's not fair, she said, voice tightening. Maybe not, but it's honest. She stared at him. You really think I care about convenience? I don't know what you care about. Then ask me. He didn't move, didn't speak. I care that Rosie calls me her co-captain, she said quietly. I care that you built that treehouse with your bare hands and didn't once complain when I dropped a beam on your foot. I care that you treat people like they matter, whether they're 7 or 70. She stepped even closer. And I care that I can breathe when I'm around you. Zane swallowed hard, his voice rough. Why are you telling me this? Because I think we're both pretending this is something casual when it isn't. He didn't answer right away. Then slowly, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You live in a world I can't touch, Harper. Then maybe I'm tired of that world, she whispered. And maybe I don't want to go back. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the hush of the house wrapping around them like a held breath. Then Rosie's voice called out from the hallway, drowsy and high-pitched. Daddy. I dreamed the narwhal turned into a prince. Zane stepped back, clearing his throat. I should check on her. Harper nodded, stepping away too. Of course. He walked down the hall, and Harper stood alone for a moment, fingers brushing the edge of the counter where his hand had been. Then she turned, picked up her empty tin, and let herself quietly out the door. Outside, the night air was cool, the kind that hinted at the changing season. She stood on her porch, looking at the treehouse lit faintly by a single bulb inside. The curtains Rosie had insisted on were fluttering gently in the breeze. Harper wrapped her arms around herself, uncertain for the first time in years. She had always known how to get what she wanted. But this wasn't a merger. This wasn't a deal she could negotiate. This was real. And it scared her more than anything else ever had. Rosie's birthday arrived on a Saturday wrapped in sunlight and birdsong. Zane stood at the base of the treehouse, hammering in the last decorative plank shaped like a star. Above him, the platform was transformed. Lilac streamers dangled from the railings, a picnic table was covered in glitter-dusted cupcakes, and a banner spelled out Captain Rosie's Sky Fort in crooked but heartfelt brushstrokes. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans, and looked up. I hope this does it, kiddo, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Behind him, the back gate creaked open. Zane turned and Harper stepped through, carrying a tray of sandwiches and balancing a small potted sunflower in the crook of her arm. She wore a denim jacket over a cream-colored top, her hair pulled into a low bun. Hey, she said, setting the tray down, I brought food and a plant. Zane blinked at the flower. For Rosie, Harper replied. She said she wanted her treehouse to have a garden corner. He let out a quiet laugh. Of course she did. Rosie came bounding out of the house, dressed in a pirate-themed tutu and a paper crown. Harper, you came. Harper knelt to hug her. Wouldn't miss it for anything, Captain. As Rosie climbed up the ladder to survey her kingdom, Harper stood and looked at Zane. You did this, all of it, he shrugged. She asked for magic. I did my best. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This is for her. Just a little something. He opened it and found a membership card to the Children's Science Museum in the city, along with a handwritten note inviting Rosie to a VIP day at their new exhibit. Zane exhaled. You didn't have to go all out. I didn't, she said softly. This isn't all out. The party was small but perfect. Rosie's 2 classmates, their parents, and Harper, who somehow managed to organize a scavenger hunt without ever stepping into the spotlight. Zane watched her from the grill, flipping burgers while she knelt beside the sandbox helping Rosie bury treasure. She wasn't performing. She didn't need anyone to see her. She was just there. As the guests trickled out and the evening settled in, Harper stayed behind to help clean. Rosie, exhausted from the day's adventures, fell asleep on a beanbag inside the treehouse before Zane could convince her to come down. He laid a blanket over her and left the ladder down in case she wanted to climb inside later. In the kitchen, Harper rinsed dishes while he dried. The silence between them was full, not awkward. I've been offered a position in London, she said suddenly, not looking at him. Zane stilled. You taking it? They want me to run global strategy. It's a lot. You'd be good at it. She turned off the faucet. I haven't said yes. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Why not? Because I don't want to leave something that finally feels grounded. Zane looked at her, unsure of what to say. I've spent most of my life building things that looked perfect from the outside, she continued. But this backyard, that treehouse, your daughter, it's the first time I've wanted to stop running. Zane's voice was quiet. I can't give you what you're used to. I don't want what I'm used to. She stepped closer. I want quiet mornings. I want burnt toast and last-minute birthday banners. I want someone who builds castles in trees and doesn't realize he's already raised a queen. His throat tightened. You sure? She smiled, not wide but certain. Yes. Outside, the sun had dipped below the rooftops, casting the yard in gold. They stepped onto the porch, side by side. Rosie was still asleep inside the treehouse, her crown askew. Harper leaned against him. I don't need London, I need this. Zane rested his hand over hers. Then stay. She looked up at him. Only if you let me help. He didn't answer with words. He kissed her not with urgency, but with quiet conviction. She melted into him, the months of slow, burning tension finally giving way to something real. A week later, Harper bought the empty lot next door not to build another mansion, but to turn it into a community garden. She didn't announce it. She didn't put her name on it. She just began showing up on Saturdays with gloves and seeds, inviting Rosie and the neighborhood kids to dig in the dirt. Zane took on more home repair work, referrals coming in faster than he could manage. Harper helped design him a website, but never once took over. She offered, he accepted. It was partnership, not rescue. Their worlds didn't collide. They wove together. And on a mild spring evening, Zane led Harper up the treehouse ladder where strings of lights glowed like stars. Rosie was with her aunt for the weekend, leaving the two of them alone for the first time in days. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a ring nestled in pine shavings. I didn't buy it at a boutique, he said. I carved the band myself. It's not perfect. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. It's everything. I can't promise a mansion or a jet or a red carpet, but I can promise a life that's real, one where you're never alone. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed beneath the lights, two lives once worlds apart, now firmly rooted in the same soil. Below them, the wind stirred the curtains in Rosie's sky fort. And for the first time, Zane realized he hadn't just built a treehouse, he'd built a home. 2 months later, the garden next door bloomed in full, wild splendor. Tomatoes tangled with sunflowers, herbs spilled over raised beds, and Rosie had claimed a corner for marigolds, which she insisted kept bad monsters and boring dreams away. Zane leaned on a shovel, watching her crouch beside the flower bed, dirt smudged on her cheek and a tiny watering can in hand. She's got your stubborn streak, Harper said behind him, her voice warm and amused. Don't start with me, he said, smiling over his shoulder. She still insists the marigolds talk to her. They probably do. Plants like good listeners. He set the shovel down and walked toward her, brushing his fingers over her waist as he passed. She fell in step beside him, the sun catching the gold band on her finger. It had taken her a week to get used to wearing it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, it was, but because it was the first promise anyone had ever made to her that wasn't tied to profit margins or press coverage. Zane stopped at the edge of the plot where a wooden sign now read, "The Rosie Patch All Welcome." He hadn't carved it. Harper had, late one night after Rosie fell asleep in the living room with her arms curled around a garden catalog. "You've been quiet lately," Harper said, glancing at him. "What's going on in that head of yours?" He tugged off his gloves and wiped a streak of sweat from his brow with the back of his arm. "I've been thinking about the shed, the one behind the house. Yeah, it's a mess, but I could clean it up, turn it into something. Maybe start offering woodworking classes on Saturdays. Rosie says I explain things better than YouTube." Harper tilted her head. "You've been thinking about this for a while. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." "Why now?" He looked at her, the weight of the last few months settling behind his eyes. "Because for the first time in a long time, I'm not just surviving, I'm building something that lasts. And I want to build more of it." She reached up, brushing a streak of dirt from his jaw. "Then let's do it. I'll help you with the permits." He blinked. "I didn't say anything about permits. You'll need them if you want to open to the public." She grinned, the kind of grin that softened her whole face. "I can navigate City Hall better than most people can navigate a sidewalk." "Of course you can." Rosie ran up then, breathless, holding something behind her back. "Close your eyes," she commanded. They obeyed. Now open, she thrust a folded piece of paper toward them. It was a hand-drawn map with a crooked house, a giant tree, a garden, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Above it, in purple crayon, she'd written, "Our forever place." Zane crouched and pulled her into a hug, his throat tight. Harper knelt beside them, smoothing the corner of the drawing. "It's perfect," she said softly. Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky in streaks of lavender and silver, Zane lit the candles on the porch table. Harper emerged from the kitchen carrying a bowl of lemon pasta and a bottle of wine. They ate barefoot, the soft hum of cicadas in the background, Rosie asleep upstairs after insisting on wearing her pirate crown to bed. "I've been thinking about something," Harper said, resting her chin on her hand as she regarded him from across the table. "That always means trouble," she nudged his foot with hers. "You joke, but it's important." Zane set down his fork. "I'm listening. I've decided not to go back to the board, not even part-time." He didn't speak, he waited. "I used to think stepping away was a pause, a break. But now I know it was the beginning of something better. I don't want to run the world anymore, Zane. I want to be part of this one." He reached across the table, curling his hand around hers. "Then stay, all in, no 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm not going anywhere." She said it like a vow. The next morning, they began clearing the shed. Zane found an old toolbox he thought he'd lost, and Harper unearthed a stack of Rosie's finger paintings that had somehow ended up behind a pile of tarpaulins. They framed 3 and hung them in the kitchen. That weekend, Harper invited a few neighbors to help repaint the shed. By the end of the day, it stood tall and clean, with a fresh coat of navy blue and white trim. Rosie added a handprint to the wooden door, followed by Zane and Harper's. Zane installed a long workbench, a pegboard for tools, and a sign above the door. Dawson Woodworks and Things That Matter. They launched their first Saturday workshop 2 weeks later. 5 kids showed up, plus 2 teenagers and 1 grandmother who wanted to build a birdhouse. Harper handled the sign-ups and emails. Rosie made lemonade and explained the difference between nails and screws with the confidence of someone twice her age. One night, as summer leaned into fall, Zane and Harper sat on the back porch watching the fireflies blink across the garden. "You ever think about what it would have been like if we met 10 years ago?" she asked. "I wouldn't have known what to do with someone like you 10 years ago. And now," he turned to her, brushing his thumb over her cheekbone. "Now I know exactly what to do. And I'm never letting go." She leaned in, kissing him slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask questions, it answered them. They married in the garden that October. Rosie picked the flowers, walked Harper down the aisle, and gave a toast that made the entire neighborhood cry. Harper wore a simple ivory dress. Zane wore suspenders and boots. They danced under string lights, clutching each other so tightly the world could have disappeared, and they wouldn't have noticed. By spring, Harper had launched a local initiative pairing young entrepreneurs with mentors across the county. Zane's workshop doubled in size. Rosie's marigolds took over the entire back fence, defying every gardening rule. They built a guest house for visiting family, adopted a rescue dog named Juniper, and never once forgot to watch the stars together on clear nights. And every time someone asked Harper how she ended up in a small town with soil under her nails and love in her bones, she'd just smile and say, "I met a man who built magic out of nothing, so I stayed and built it with him." And she never once looked back.